people watch a lot of shows, they get into things on Netflix, and you're not just some creator and producer that works on the idea but is not invested. You're in the trenches. You are a guy that
I love the trenches.
Just the toys that made us in a toy store near you. You were actually hitting the aisles. You were going to the stores, finding the collectibles.
Yeah, I mean, I try to sell shows that are hobbies of mine so that A, I'm getting paid to do my hobby, but B, like that passion that you need to make a show, because it takes a long time and a lot of work. You really need to be excited about the show to try and do a good job. So yeah, I buy toys.
If I recall correctly, you said that the Millennium Falcon was your holy grail of Star Wars toys.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it was like I used to bite my fingernails, and my mom told me if I didn't bite them for a year, she would get it for me. And I stopped very hard, other than quitting smoking. That's the second hardest thing I've ever quit. I'm not even trying to be funny. And I got my Millennium Falcon and proceeded to obliterate it over the next 10 years.
All right. It lasted 10 years. That's actually pretty good.
It did, but not in flyable shape.
All right. Much like, arguably at times the real Millennium Falcon or the real Millennium Falcon. But that certainly was not your first Star Wars toy.
No, my first, and I still have my original R2-D2 and one of my original Stormtroopers. I still have those. And those, in my collection that is absurdly big now, I do believe those are the two old. I have two minifigs from Lego. Those are probably those four toys are tied for the oldest toys in my 2,000 plus toy collection.
And what is the current status of that Stormtrooper and R2?
It's funny you asked that because this is crazy. The R2-D2 and one of those minifigs is in my home collection. The Stormtrooper and the other minifig is at a friend of mine's house. In the insane off chance, this will show you how crazy I am, that I've had to evacuate my house twice in the last 2 years because of fires. If God forbid anything happens to my home here in LA, my two oldest pieces, I have a backup. That's how crazy I am.
It's sort of like whenever the Congress and president gather in Washington, there has to be the designated survivor, right?
These are my toy designated survivors. I'm going to steal that from you. I love that.
So the R2 units that I had, and we're pretty close in age. The R2 unit I had, it's still around, but man, it's not in great shape. The dome is loose. The sticker is off, and then my Stormtrooper totally yellowed. Is yours same thing, or does it actually look good?
My R2's dome is great. It still makes that super duper weird noise that, we all know how it was made, but it was still kind of weird. But the stickers are very faded. And my Stormtrooper, like, you can tell it's 40 years old, but it's not yellow or anything.
There was always the toy hacks that I would do as a kid. Like, we all knew Boba Fett's rocket was supposed to launch, and we all knew that there was
Boba Fett.
That there was a toy that was supposedly out there where his rocket did launch. So since we couldn't do that, we instead tried to just pry the rocket out of the existing figure. Were there any toy or figure hacks that you would do as a kid that you remember?
I'll tell you something crazy, man. No one's asked me this before, and I've never really told anybody this. I have always loved G.I. Joe vehicles. And I'm talking about the toy, not the canon.
Yeah.
I love G.I. Joe vehicles way more than the Star Wars vehicles, other than the Millennium Falcon and the Star Destroyer. When I was a kid, the majority of my battles were Star Wars figures flying, extra big quotes, flying, the Cobra Hydrofoil, the G.I. Joe whale, like those, that's usually how I did my play battles.
Yeah.
So that was my big hack.
I guess the 3 3/4 inch scale just made it so perfect that you could cross over with.
Exactly.
Even like the Marvel character, the Secret Wars character, and superpowers, they all existed in this universe together. But I'm getting too far away from Star Wars. Like for now, what do you think? Is it Ahsoka, or what are the characters? What are the figures that you think people are kind of getting into now? Because obviously we're legacy collectors and nerds. We grew up with the first generation of it. But what are the things that people are attaching themselves to now? Anecdotally, as much as you can say.
What's really interesting is with the toy collecting of it all, if something becomes a high value toy, unless it's directly in the short term collected to a fad, like Beanie Babies, usually they hold value. And all you have to do is look at the original 1950s and 60s G.I. Joe, 1950s and 60s Barbie. Like if something was worth 20 grand 10 years ago or 20 years ago, it's worth that at least, if not more, even though a lot of the people that were playing with those toys in the 50s and 60s have died. So you would say to yourself, well, who wants this? Nobody was alive. But I guess once you get into pop culture, you're in pop culture. Mm-hmm. So I don't think anything will go down, but I think and it's already started. By the way, I mean, Ahsoka Tano, like all of her stuff, especially because it was made in limited numbers when it came out in the early aughts, as they say, maybe not early aughts, but like 2008 to 2012, like there's an Ahsoka Tano that's 2,000 to 3,000 now. Not a prototype, not a sample, not a paint test, literally an Ahsoka Tano that was still in the package, MOC, that's 2 to 3 grand now. So that's because a lot of the people that are 10 to 20 years behind us, they're starting to have money. And the same way you and I wanted to start collecting when we got a little money, now they are too.
Some of the rarest figures that have been out there, to my knowledge, in the past have been sort of the Obi-Wan, Darth Vader, the double telescoping lightsaber. There's the Vlix figure from Droids, which was, I think, Brazil, but never made its way over here. And then,
well, it's not just that. It's even worse than that. They only made 2,000 of them. About 2 weeks after they went on sale, Lucasfilm went crazy and got rightfully angry. I mean, they were not, Kenner should not have done that, nor should Glass Lead. So they were pulled off the shelves. Then there was a fire.
You could get really crazy with the collecting, and yes, sometimes you have to establish rules. I mean, I know I'm fortunate to work a lot of Comic Cons, and I'm out there and I've established rules for collecting, so I don't spend too much money or go too crazy, things like that. Do you have any rules that you apply to yourself?
Well, number one rule, it must go on display. So I will not buy anything to just go into storage, because if I did that, it theoretically violates my whole reason for toy collecting, which is the objects give me some joy. So if I'm putting it in the garage or storage shed, it doesn't give me any joy. This is getting harder and harder for two reasons. One, I now have a lot of quote unquote insider knowledge. So I'm not buying things that I know will appreciate in value. So that's tough. And then the other thing is, like, it's kind of a bad theory because it ends up costing me more money in the long run, because I guarantee you I will have to buy a new house next year because my collection room is already getting too small. But that's the first rule. Nothing goes to storage. My second rule, and this only applies, have you ever heard of this place called Frankensons?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I almost feel bad telling you and your fans about it, but there's, I don't know really the whole story behind it, but an hour's drive from LA, it's 2 full-size warehouses where I think they tore the wall down in between them. And I think Monday through Friday, it's where people that sell vintage, or not even vintage, it's where toy sellers that don't own a store keep their stuff, and then they sell it online. On Saturdays, it's open to the public. So Before COVID, my rule was I would go there only once a year for my birthday. So that's already a rule, because if I went there more than once a year, we'd be bankrupt and living on the streets. And two, I bring $1,000 cash and I leave all my credit cards at home. And by the way, dude, I've gone in there and spent it in the first 12 minutes I've been in there, and like basically had to walk around like a jackass for 2 hours and not buy anything else. So that's the majority of my rules are right there.
Brian, before I let you go, man, you are working on so many things. I know we have a new season of Toys and Made Us at some point. I know you're working on this Gates McFadden Star Trek podcast your company is producing. And what else is on the way that you can talk about, man?
Well, yeah, I'm glad you phrased it that way, because there's a lot of stuff I can't talk about yet, but two things I can talk about. Excuse me. We're partnered with Dwayne Johnson and his company, $7, and we have a show coming out called Behind the Attraction that's all about the attractions at the various Disney parks. So that's, I can't say when, but that's coming out this year. And then we have another show, which I literally cannot even believe is real, called The Center Seat 55 Years of Star Trek. And we're making that for History Channel. And it's to the best of my knowledge, it is the deepest dive documentary about all of Star Trek. Like, we're doing an episode, I think we're doing the first documentary ever about the animated series.
Oh, cool.
We'll have the first one out ever about Voyager. There's another one being made that looks fantastic, but I think we'll get out before them, yada, yada, yada. So those are, and then A Toy Store Near You, which is coming out in June, season 3. So I'm pretty excited about 2021.